Shikori Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki Jai. Gaura ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Good evening, everyone. Last night here together. So we're going to continue our discussion from earlier sessions regarding or lila, and let's begin where we picked up, or excuse me, where we left off last night, which was, technically speaking, backtracking a little bit from where we were, because we we had been discussing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's entering into the sannyas order, and we touched on it briefly, and all of that, of course, historically speaking, chronologically speaking, occurs after his private and internal and experimental, as we discussed last night, if you will, sessions of Rasa Sankirtan in the house of Shivastapa, after those sessions had overflowed into the public domain to some extent, at any rate. And obviously Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's entering the renounced order, as we have discussed, was a strategy, if you will, on his part, that by which he sought to create a teaching moment. Given that the order is not for anyone and everyone, indeed, typically speaking, it would be for, it was an order that much elderly gentlemen, retired from family life and so forth, would enter into. So the fact that he was not only had thought to accept the sannyas order, but he was only 24 years old at the same time. So this, as we'll see going forward, it's really stood out in the minds of elders outside of the immediate group, that other than Gadadhar Pandit, for the most part, were not critical of the strategy from a philosophical point of view. They were just emotionally critical of it, and could not bear the thought of his departing, and the subsequent Aishvarya that it would create, and thus impair the previous intimacy with him that they were familiar with. I mean, he would now become Sri Krishna Chaitanya. That's a big name. Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Previously, he was Vishwambar Mishra, Nimai Pandit, his nickname. These names don't have any Aishvarya in them. They're very sweet, and speak to us about the nature of the intimacy of Navadvip, which, as we know, is a, well, Sreta Dvip. What is it? Dvip Nam, Navadvip Gram. So it's a statement from Chaitanya Bhagavat that I've cited earlier. The implication is, of course, that within the yantra of Goloka, which is a square, there's a hexagon and a lotus. So this is I like to say, a sonic, because it's the words of the mantra are inscribed there. It's a geometrical and a poetic description, very abstract one, of the nature of the Mahavaikunta, also known as Goloka, also known as Parasveta Dvip. And so within the square is the hexagon, and at the center of that is a lotus, and in that we find Gokul. Within Goloka is the Gokul. Corresponds with the Gokul on earth. It's very intimate. Outside of that, it's Goloka. And for example, there outside of that, there are other regions within the larger picture of Svetadweep where Radha and Krishna are married, and there may be even on the outer edge, Jagannath Puri, where we're going to go to today. But which is also, comparatively speaking, a lila of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is filled with Aishvarya, the Aishvarya of his Vairagya and his Gyan, Jnana Vairagya. Aishvarya Sisamadra Virya Selya Shashashrita. Jnana Vairagya. So this means that it's a classical definition of Bhagawan, who possesses all 6 opulences and thus is all attractive. He has all wealth, strength, beauty, fame, wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, and renunciation, Gyan and Vairagya. So we see these 2 opulences manifest in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, particularly in his sannyasa. Yes, we see knowledge in him also as Nimai Pandit, but that was a different kind of knowledge. It was considered sophistry by his by the Vaishnavas, and they objected to it. As we heard, they were the only people in Navadvip who were upset with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with Vishwambar, because they loved him. They were very attracted to him, but they had to toe the line. He was wasting his life with just punditry and sophistry and so forth. And secretly, and even amongst one another, they would conclude if we could get him in our fold, then we would really have some strength. And so, which came to pass, of course. But as it came to pass, only months afterwards, he returned from East Bengal, maddened with love of God, having been initiated by Ishwar Puri. 1509, a little later in the year, in July, during the Guru Purnima, Nityananda Prabhu has arrived on the scene. Now everyone is there. All the essential players have assembled. In January, February of 1510, he's taking sannyas and leaving. So we heard about the heartbreak, what this would mean for the inhabitants of Navadvip. It was for this reason that once, in more modern times, some of the godbrothers of one of Pujapad Chandra Maharaj's close associates who had passed away, they had thought to perform a Ratha Yatra in Navadvip. Somebody asked me about this the other day. And as a kind of a preaching strategy. And people would come and so forth. But Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj commented, he said, the residents of the Dham, who you may be able to see or may not, this will remind them of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sannyas lila. This is something that would be troublesome for them. So he suggested instead, perform a festival of bringing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Jagannath Puri back to Navadvip, which he did do at one point, to reunite, at least for a short period, with everybody in Nadia. And the hometown hero had returned. And if everybody liked him previously, well, now it was magnified that much more, so much so that I think I mentioned it, that poetically, Kaviraj Goswami said there were so many people swimming in the Ganges to go to Madhusudan Vachaspati's house, where he was held up to have his darshan, that others walked on their heads to get across Ganga. poetic device, wants to say. The place was electrified by his return. So it was a suggestion of Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj how to adjust it from point of view of sacred aesthetic rapture that would be pleasing to the inhabitants of Vrindavan, of Navadvip, who are overwhelmed at the thought of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's departure and the distance that adopting the name, the dress, and so forth of a sannyasi will create between themselves and himself. So I want to just back up a little bit again to remind us of the significance of Srivas Thakur's house, which we discussed yesterday as an appearance day of Srivas Thakur, one of the members of the Panchatattva, who represents, in many respects, our own prospect, more so than other members of the Panchatattva, because he is considered to be a perfected Vibhinamsa, Tatastha Jiva. Whereas Nityananda Prabhu is Bhagavan as the Prakash, and Advaita is Bhagavan as the Avatar, and of course Gadadhar is Bhakti Shakti, the Swarup Shakti, the internal potency. Bhakti is the essence of. So, worth underscoring, Srivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Well, we are the Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, the rest, etc. Adi, the rest of the devotees under the auspices, if you will, of Srivas Thakur, who is, as we heard yesterday, often or unanimously identified with Narada. Nard, of course, he's considered like a farcical Brahmin. He's a Brahmin, but he does some odd things himself. He's a little peculiar in some ways, in good ways. He is, of course, as Rupa Goswami describes, a devotee of Krishna in Sakyarasa. Now, his Sakyarasa is not the Sakyarasa of Braj, but he would be like he's a friend of a metropolitan friend of Krishna rather than a bucolic friend. Puri Sambandhi. So he's this type of Sakyarasa. Arjuna of the Pandavas is like this as well. And his Sakyarasa is bundled together with a little bit of Dasya also. This is Narada Muni, and this is Srivas Thakur. And in Srivas Thakur's house, which, as we discussed last night, his house became centered entirely on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Nam Sankirtan. It was living, in his whole household existing under the guidance of Srivas Thakur, only for the pleasure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I said last night, when we take a small room or a closet or something and put Krishna in there in our house, and every now and then we open it and close it. But his whole house became the altar. And the altar that he had, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat on it at times and showed who he was and showed the devotees who they were, which is very extraordinary because, of course, they thought, as I've often said, and they had flashes of insight that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna himself. And they had some reasoning to support their insight because Krishna Prema Pradayate, he was giving Krishna Prema. The implication of it being what? Well, they thought he was godly. That's one thing. To say that he's an empowered being, we talked about Avatar Tattva on Gaur Purnima at some length, which is a theological cornerstone within Hinduism. We don't find any other religious tradition that I'm aware of that has a very well-developed theory of how God appears in the world. People say So often, well, why should I believe in God? I've never seen God. We say, well, come to India. I mean, and learn. What did you think God would look like? What were you looking for? Hmm? Come to California, and I can show you God. Hmm? Among the redwood, trees of Northern California, I am the redwoods. Hmm? Like you said. Hmm? I think it's a verse from Bhagavad Gita. You have to understand the principle that's being described there in the 10th canto. The powerful manifestations of nature that just cause us to step back for a moment from our unconscious way in which we are seeing the world as if it's centered around us, that it's for us. These powerful manifestations of nature, they displace us from that for a moment. As you walk among the redwoods, you realize, I'm not the subject here. They are. Or we come to the ocean, and we can't see the depths, we can't see the edges, and so on and so forth. So Krishna says this repeatedly in the Bhagavad Gita, pointing out different powerful manifestations of nature and identifying himself with such. Now, people say sometimes, materialistic people or even atheistic people say, yeah, I know what you guys are talking about. I've been to the mountaintop and I had that little epiphany, and, but you're making a lot more out of it than what it is. No, we're doing more with it is what we're doing. We're getting a glimpse, and I think we should see the whole thing here. We should step back and take note of that and try to not look at ourselves as the center and so forth. And so then we become acquainted with and experience even more direct and profound manifestations of the Godhead in the world. And so in Srimad Bhagavad, while this avatar theory is seeds that are found in the Veda, it blossoms in the Puranas, it's tied together in the Bhagavatam, where you find Yuga avatars, Manvantar avatars, lila avatars. You find Shaktivesh avatars, different kinds of Shaktivesh avatars. And ultimately you find Avatari, Krishna's true Bhagavan Swayam. And the Goswamis, of course, are drawn from this and written about it extensively. And this, in general, aside from what they've done, which is a great contribution, as I said, is a theological cornerstone throughout Hinduism. Hinduism has, in other words, some idea of how, to different measures or to different extents, God is readily appearing in the world. Different purposes at different times and so forth. I mean, to take it a step further, of course, with all due respect to all religious traditions and the saints that they give rise to and so forth, there's not a lot of information about God, what God's like. That is not necessarily a fault, but that is just where we've been given in Hinduism, the opportunity to pick up where that leaves off, and within Gaudiya Vaishnavism, where Hinduism leaves off, pick up on that. And that's a great contribution, positive contribution to the religious world. So they thought Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, maybe he's Krishna. Why would they think like that? Their logic was, they had the epiphany. That's why they would think like that. But then they have to strengthen their heart with their head. They have to bring the two together. You have to bring your head with your heart so that your heart and your faith has some intellectual integrity. Not that it will rule over it. We should use our heads to soften our hearts, but we should use our heads. This is not an excuse for not thinking. The guru is not someone who will do the thinking for you. Yes, he or she will tell us something about what to think about, but more than that, they'll try to teach us how to think, how to use your head very wisely. And this is in essence, the idea to soften the heart, soften the heart, to strengthen your faith by reasoning about it, drawing from sacred texts where a considerable reason is given, and so forth. So they reasoned, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, that he's giving Krishna prema. No avatar has Krishna prema to give. All the avatars that come from Narayan, well, Narayan doesn't have Krishna prema. Krishna has certain qualities that are shared, obviously, by other manifestations of himself, but he has some that are exclusive to himself. There are 4 of them that are singled out and accompanied by the word Madhurya, sweet, sweet, sweet. Sweet means intimacy. And so Venu Madhurya, Krishna carries a sweet flute. That is his weapon. All the different gods and goddesses in Hinduism, of which there are sometimes people say 33 million, and it's a criticism. You got 33 million gods there. I've even heard Hindus say it, as they've converted to Christianity. But there's more than 33 million. We should tell them. God has asankhya, Bhagavatam, asankhya face, unlimited faces. And the one in your tradition, that's also his face there. We also acknowledge that. That's one of them. And let's analyze it and look at it. And so what face it is and so forth. So Venu Madhurya, he has a sweet flute. This is Krishna. He has no weapon. He's not doing anything. Granted, Shiva doesn't have any weapons either. Well, he has a trident, I guess. He does carry that at times. But what he's doing is not doing. His doing is the opposite. His not doing is the opposite of doing. Everyone else is doing. Brahma's doing. He's managing. He's got 4 heads. Indra's, everybody, all of the gods and goddesses, they've got something to do, and they've got some weapons, some carrier, vehicle. Durga's riding on a tiger, and so on and so forth. And then we come to Krishna. He has no vehicle. He is the vehicle for his friends who defeat him in wrestling, for which the fruit is, the result is that you have to carry me on your shoulders. That's his carrier in Vrindavan. He has no weapons, as we say. He has the flute. Now gopis will think that's quite a weapon they got there. Therefore, they try to steal it. Sometimes they're successful also. We talked about some of these kind of loving intrigues and so forth, centered around his vamsi, his flute, his Venu Madhurya, his sweet flute. The implication, of course, in all of this is that Krishna, unlike the other gods and goddesses, he has nothing to do, and he doesn't do nothing. All the gods and goddesses have something to do, and Shiva has nothing. He does nothing. What I'm saying, this is the difference between karma and gyan in a sense, right? In gyan, you don't do anything. You just sit down. There's no more acquisition. There's no more dealing with the world. It's just meditation. But Krishna's not doing anything. He doesn't have anything to do, and he doesn't just sit down. He doesn't just do nothing. It means also that karma means movement. Under the influence of karma, we're moving in relation to objects that we've identified with, that we seek to acquire, by which we think will become more and thus fulfilled. In Gyan, we stop moving in relation to these things because we know that if we want enduring happiness, it's not going to derive from things that don't endure. That's a dumb idea. That's how dumb we are under the influence of karma. And so in karma, there's movement, and in Gyan, there's no movement. Just sit. Like the Buddha. All he did was sit. Try it. So that's all you sit. All he did was sit down. But we've got karma, so we get up. But it's hard to just sit down given our trajectory and our momentum. Because bhakti is very beautiful. Because it allows us, it works with us on the move. In other words, we're moving in relation to the world. And we can continue to do so with bhakti. You can go shopping for bhakti, for Krishna. right? Pastime of many people. Probably going to slow down with the economy these days, but you get the point, right? So bhakti is friendly, but also the idea is that in love, there is both movement, right? There's diversity, and there's the singleness, singularity of unity. So Krishna, at any rate, this is the idea. He has nothing to do. He who has nothing to do is all powerful. Wait a minute, everybody else looks powerful. Krishna looks like he's unpowerful. In fact, he's being defeated even in wrestling by his friends. He has to, if no one's looking, bend down and touch the feet of Radha. Because if the yogis are looking, they'll fall out of samadhi. What? God? He's God, and he's worshiping somebody else. Prabhupada used to say, all the religions are teaching that God is the most worshipable object, and we are teaching that God has a worshipable object. Krishna has a worshipable object in the form of Sri Radha. Sri Radhika ki jai, Radhe, Radhe. So, as I often say, if you want to play, then you have to have some power. In other words, if you want to take a vacation, you have to have some money in the bank. You have to have some power at work to get time off and so forth. So Krishna is only playing, so the implication is he must be all powerful. He's only playing. He's all powerful. And he has a flute. That is his weapon. Venu Madhurya. He has lila Madhurya. Lila is a word a Sanskrit word. I've explained it a number of times and written about it as well, but it's really in the Hindu sacred text. This word lila, properly understood, applies in a full sense of the term to Krishna's Vrindavan pastoral leelas, not even to his Mathura and Dwarka rules. And we do call that lila, but even in the Bhagavatam, the word is not used for the most part in that way, because in relation to Dwarka, Mathura, because there, what is the difference? But in Vrindavan, and we said Krishna has nothing to do. In Mathura, he's got something to do. In Dwarka, and that leads to more to do, which is what happens. Start with one thing and then another thing, and that's right. This reminds me of the story of the sage who had a disciple and Guru then went on a journey traveling, and meanwhile the disciple, what happened to him? Something. I think he used to hang his copings out to dry, and some mouse would come and eat them, a hole in them. He was upset. So the neighbor said, "Why don't you get a cat?" Yeah. So then he got a cat, and then the cat did his thing, and so he said, "Well, get a dog," and went and get a wife, and wife said, "You should have some kids," and so we still all developed like this. And Guru came back after many years and said, "Oh boy, what's happened here?" And so he said, "Well, this subset, we'd like to cook you some dinner." He said, "Well, why don't we go to the Ganga here, the river, and bathe first, and then I'll come back." And so he goes to the river and bathes, and then his disciple hears him calling, "Help, help." So he runs to the river, and there he is in the river holding on to a log. And he says, "Help. I'm attached to the log here. I can't get out." So I told him. And he previously they had a discussion where the Guru said, "Why don't you just let go here?" if it's that's the real solution to your problem. Let go, give up your copings for that matter. Sukadeva was walking naked. So anyway, so then there's a group, disciple comes to the shore and he says, just let go of the log. Just let go. Log's not holding you, you're holding the log. That's my point. So he let go of the log. And the disciple joined him. Wife became his disciple, and the cat and the mouse. Because he was a Vaishnava. Accommodate all of that, such as the generous, powerful nature of bhakti in comparison to other practices of yoga and gyan, which are sattvic, rather than from the nirguna. So Krishna in Mathura and Dwarka, he's establishing the Dharma and so forth. If you study in the Bhagavad Lila, Prakat Lila, yes, he's slaying demons and so forth, but it's really just it's part of his play. It's and even Krishna's Kaviraj goes so far as to say it's the Vishnu inside him that's slaying them. And you can, if you look and see like Gopal Champu, you find Krishna has a response to all the demons that he slays, and he takes himself out of the equation. What could I do? This happened. This guy did this and tripped him, and so on and so forth. So he's only playing there, but comparatively, he has something to accomplish, establish ethical norms, dharma, and, morality, and so on and so forth. It's going kind of. It's coming from the pinnacle of the religious experience that transcends moral and ethical considerations to such dharma, establishing. You have to set a good example. Krishna says in the Gita, Yadiratra Tishveshas Tattademi Torojana Sayat Pramanam Gurute Lokostara. I have to set a good example for people. Otherwise, what will become of the world? Well, that's why you keep Vrindavan hidden. Because your example there. It's confusing, to say the least. So there he has lila madhurya. He has lilas. They're very sweet. We look at what are the lilas of Narayan. Can anyone tell me one of the lilas of Narayan? I don't even know one. You can say, well, he has lila avatars. Varaha did this and this one and that, and they're all there, mentioned in the Bhagavatam also, all for the purpose of shedding light on the sweet lilas of Krishna by comparison. He is, well, Lila Purushottam, the supreme person of Lila, personification of Lila. So he has Lila, he has Venu Madhurya, he has Lila Madhurya, he has Rupa Madhurya. His form is very sweet. In Bhagavatam, we find the story of how Arjuna, a great Kshatriya warrior, was approached by a Brahmin whose sons, one after another, after being born, were disappearing. And so the Kshatriyas are supposed to protect the Brahmins and so forth. And so Arjuna took it seriously, and he said, "Well, if your next son disappears like this, I will find him, or I will give up my life." And he couldn't find him. So Krishna stepped in and said, "Hold on, Arjuna, come with me." And they went to the Svetadweep within the universe, of this thought. And there they met Narayan, Vishnu, who said, "Well, I did steal him, but I did because I wanted to get your darshan. I want to take the guy I knew." Once Arjuna said that, and you'd come here and so forth. So it's like one of the many, many, many examples that from the Bhagavatam that Jiva Goswami gives in Krishna Sandarbha to establish Krishna's to Bhagavan Swami. Even Narayan is attracted to the form of Krishna. Indeed, even Krishna is attracted to his own form. When he sees a reflection in a jeweled pillar, he becomes stunned by his own Rupa Madhurya. So he has Venu Madhurya, he has Lila Madhurya, he has Rupa Madhurya, and he has Prema Madhurya. prema madhurya, sweet type of prema. Vaikuntha is a name for the Pradabhyam, for the spiritual world. I mean, Vaikuntha means without any anxiety. It's a big place, right? It's beyond time and space. It's beyond time and space, but it has shape. How do we harmonize these two seemingly contradictory ideas, right? There's planets, there's people, shape, but so of course it's one way to think about that, of course, is that it's if you go to Brahman, enter Brahman, it's unlimited. It's beyond time and space. You kind of, okay, I'm entering into the vast, indeterminate absolute. There are no borders there. There's no end. Then we start talking about Vaikuntha, it looks like it's getting smaller, right? From a vast, like standing on the shore of the ocean, you cannot find it, or the sky where it ends. Now there are shapes, but it's actually getting bigger, because what's happening from Brahman to Vaikuntha is the absolute is going from indeterminate to determinate. As such, it's becoming possible to love the absolute, because it had the more specificity there is about something which is lovable, the more capacity to love that object arises, right? In Bhagavad Gita, in the 11th chapter, when Krishna showed himself to be the universe inside of him, and him inside the universe, sitting on the chariot at the same time, Arjuna's capacity to love him was diminished as his more concentrated, determinate form, two-armed Krishna, Parthasarathi, his chariot driver, and so forth, had now turned into the universe. And so as we go from Brahman to Vaikuntha, we are coming in proximity of the determinate manifestation of the absolute, which is that where now there's capacity for loving. So as I've said before, let's say you love someone, then if you love someone, then you could be happy living in the hollow of a tree. Anyway, what's that song? What's the famous one?
Even though we ain't got money.
Even though we ain't got money. Something like that. Still in love with the honey. Next line is probably the one I'm thinking of. But anyway, so that's the point, right? With affection, the more there is affection, the more there is space, the more accommodating it is. You can be on a big desert alone, have all the space you could possibly want, but prefer to live in a very small, diminished, geographically speaking space where there's love, because it's bigger, it's more accommodating. So the determinate feature of the absolute is more accommodating. It affords us the capacity to love. And if we go to Vrindavan, it becomes even smaller than Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha, oh, it's big. There are all kinds of possibilities. There are all kinds of people there. Some people, they worship Narayan, and they have a desire in their heart to live on the planet of God. Pretty cool idea. I'd like to live on the planet of God. I'm tired of this president, that prime minister, this demon, and that one. I'm tired of all this. I want to live in this, on the planet of God. And no, I'm not going to get too close to him, but I'd like to live on his planet. So this is called salokya. Salokya, it's a type of mukti. And by following varnashram, mixing with bhakti, with that, with karma, they can go there. They don't have prema. They have some love for for Narayan, surely. But praying, that is a special thing. Or they want Shashti, to have the opulences of God, and so forth. Now there are others who want only praying for God. And they accept Salokya because, well, they're going to have to live on the planet, but that's okay. They accept it for service. So they have a type of praying. But all the sampradayas, or the great lineages of the Vaishnavas that posit the Vaikuntha as that domain that is the ideal to attain, refer to their prayojan as mukti. Mukti. Even other not Ragmark Sampradayas, Vallabha Sampradaya and Bark Sampradaya, what speak of Ramanuja Madhya. Mukti is the goal. There's a special statement among the Gaudiyas. They say what? What do they say? You should know this. They say the goal is, what's the goal? Praying prayojan. Praying prayojan. That's the goal. So they really zero in on this word praying, right? And while they admit that there's praying in Vaikuntha with Aishvarya, the full face of praying that is not only in Goloka, which has Mathura and Dwarka, but in Braj, there's the full face of praying. Praying prayojan. So praying Madhurya. He has this sweet type of praying that can't be found anywhere else. Can't be found anywhere else. So no other avatar is going to give Prema Madhurya. But this Nimai Pandit, even before he is Krishna Chaitanya, amongst them, in intimacy, they have a flash. He must be God. He must be Krishna because he's giving Krishna praying. See how wise they were, how thoughtful they were. And of course, then, as I say often, they thought, and that couldn't be true because if he is giving Krishna praying and he's Krishna, who would have the prerogative amongst avatars to do that, it can't be alone because you can't have Krishna praying without, you have Krishna and you need the praying. You need the devotee who is in praying. The two are one and different simultaneously, right? Love of Krishna and Krishna. This is a Chintya Veda Veda. They're one and different. You can't have one without the other. They interpenetrate one another. So they thought, well, if he is Krishna, as it would seem, because he seems to be giving Krishna praying, but where are his devotees? Where are his associates? And of course, then they realize it's us. Oh my God. We're in another lila. Everything's turned upside down. Krishna, the enjoyer, has become a devotee, and now he's becoming a renunciate. This is like turning everything upside down. And then, of course, then they'll be covered by Yoga Maya. This is sadhana, siddha, sadhaka siddha bhumi, Navadi, the land where siddhas are playing under the influence of Yoga Maya as sadhakas, and they're playing very well. So they're humble prayers that you read and you think, why is this guy praying like this? That love of God, because they're playing their role and they're really absorbed in it and they really think it. How desperate they are. They're telling us how needy we are. We have no idea how needy we are. We are, but Sridhar Maharaj used to say, we're living in the jaws of death. There we are. We're like on death row. We've got our sentence in our cell. It's the cell. We've got our sentence, and it's just a matter of time. And so, I know that's a negative way of talking about it, but there's a positive side to it, right? We can do something about it, right? We can do something about it. We can appeal to the highest authority, right? What will we appeal for? Mercy. That's all. Not justice. That'll lock us up forever. The mercy. The generosity of Bhagavan. So they thought, oh, this Krishna Chaitanya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. They had flashes like this. It's extraordinary lila. There they are in the house of Srivastakur. There, the Narada Muni, Srivastakur, who, when we look deeper, we see, oh, he's Madhu Mangal. As Krishna expands himself for different leelas in Mathura and Dwarka, so his intimate entourage expands along with him. So the farcical Brahman of Krishna Leela is his cowherd friend. Well, he's actually not a cowherd. He's a Brahmin. He hangs out with all the cowherds and tries to distinguish himself from them. Should be given deference and so forth, which makes him the butt of jokes of everyone, and he makes everyone laugh. He's full of hasyarasa. But he's an armasaka, which means he's an intimate friend of Krishna, who's privy to Krishna's romantic life and assists Krishna in it. But he's also a Vidusaka, which is a bit of a buffoon. And so the problem with Madhamangal, in terms of an ideal, is that when he seeks to often assist in Krishna's romantic life, he makes blunders. And when he's Krishna wants him to cover up, he accidentally uncovers the fact before Radha that Krishna was somewhere else with Chandravali at that time, and so on and so forth. But Prabhupada liked him very much, and his penchant for ladus was something that Prabhupada liked to dream about himself. But here we find Srivastakur, because in the Angor, in the courtyard of Srivastakur, where the Mahaprabhu would perform his kirtan in his house, you have a lot of houses that are built like this, and there was a courtyard in the center in those days. There he would perform his kirtan. That was Ragmar kirtan, right? From there, his Ragmar dispensation is going to come out, and he uses the sannyas as a device to facilitate that. Yes, Krishna Chaitanya is also distributing the Harinam and the Yuga Dharma. But another reason that we consider him to be Swayam Bhagavan is because what? We said Krishna's not, in Vrindavan, he's not establishing the Dharma. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna, he has an internal reason for appearing, and he has an external reason for appearing. His internal reason, as we heard earlier, was, well, he's trying to compensate or reciprocate, I should say, in kind for the gopis' love, which is so sadhuna, so saintly. So he thought, well, maybe if I become a saint, then I can, do that, and I can preach about the glory of your love. This is his thinking. Oh, they were so charmed by him. He will say at that time, as we heard, I could not reciprocate in kind for you. And as he explains himself, his shortcoming, they are overwhelmed by thinking how far beyond lacking in reciprocation, how they're being overwhelmed. But it's just like, anyway, I could give an example the women would like, but if their men would only respond like that sometimes, they would like them that much more. Something. So the Krishna is very charming there in that section of the Bhagavatam. So charming, overwhelms them. He's so beautiful. He's so clever. Actually, so thoughtful and considerate. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, let me become a sadhu. So he becomes a sadhu, right? This is the idea of Chaitanya. That's his internal reason. And that happens to correspond with the Kali Yuga. So he's going to distribute the Yuga Dharma. That sounds like the work of Vishnu. In one sense it is. But if we look carefully, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, if you weren't looking, was he took the Yuga Dharma and he wove it together in a garland, like together with the flowers of praying. And that's what he gave to the world. Praying. Ragmarg, that's what he gave. Through his Nam Sankirtan, Golokel Premodhan, Harinam Sankirtan, he exported it from there, from Goloka to here. So that he is Swayam Bhagavan. He has nothing to do either. He's just chanting. Right? You could say he's trying to experience Radha's love, but that is the play of love, right? So there, in Srivas Angam, in the courtyard of Srivas, where he's doing this Rasa Kirtan, it is appropriate, as we have said, that very place, Srivas means the Vas, the residence of Sri Hari. This is the heart of Srivas Thakur, manifesting as a courtyard. That's what it is. And Srivas Thakur is Madhu Mangal. His heart. From his heart comes Srivas Angam. We should pay respect to his heart. That place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu experimented with the holy name. He saw it's working really good, the Sankirtan. Now I will give it to the people. Spread it far and wide. Of course, this is another way in which we can understand that Sakirasa plays a subordinate role in Chaitanya Sampradaya, which has its own beauty and charm. But on top of that, it serves very effectively to circulate Madhurya Rasa. As I said last night, Vrindavan Dasa said, Nityananda Prabhu has given Gopi Bhav to the world because he gave Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was trying to give it to the world, but he was unsuccessful. He needed Nityananda Prabhu. He took the sannyas to create a teachable moment, right? Because, well, if someone sees a sannyasi and he's in a different color, immediately, oh, that's some sadhu, we can learn from him and so forth, with his respect which was shown. But as a sannyasi, then there's certain places he couldn't go. He couldn't go to the brothel, because then they would think, what kind of sannyasi is that? Everything would be ruined. So he very strictly followed the sannyas standards, to the extent that he frightened the elderly sannyasis. You can imagine what a teachable moment he created. Like I said, he took sannyas, he's only 24 years old. These 50, 60, 70-year-old sannyasis, like Brahmanda Bharati, dressed in a clear skin, they were like trembling at the measure of his vairagya, his aishvarya, one of these opulences. His knowledge was his love. It was the full measure of knowledge. Bhakti ultimately is the end of Raja Vidya Raja Kuyam. Pavitra Midam Uttamam. Krishna says in Gita, now I'm going to tell you now, the king of knowledge, beginning of the 9th chapter. At the end of the 9th chapter, what does he say? This is the end of knowledge. Okay, obeisance to me, become my devotee, fix your mind on me. Bhakti is the end of knowledge. If you love me, to know me, and to love me is to know me. That's the idea. Right? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as we heard, then he came to Katwa, he took sannyas, and he more or less told his immediate associates that you're right, we're in another lila. And in this lila, we are sacrificers. I'm the sacrificer. Now I'm Krishna is the enjoyer. The devotee is offering everything to the enjoyer, right? Giving up, sacrifice, everything for the center. Everything for the center. I'm displacing myself from the center because there's more on the circumference. That's his idea. He saw the taste of Radha's, her experience of rasa exceed his own. So he's in an existential crisis at that point. Like, I thought I was the king of rasa, but what to do here? Of course, he's very intelligent, so he thought about this very deeply. When he saw in the Prakat Lila the measure of Radha's love experienced by him when he disappeared from her to see her condition, he thought that she knows more, but she has a deeper experience of rasa than me, and I am Rasaraj, the king of rasa. This is a problem. So he thought about it. He's very smart. very, very intelligent. And he realized that there's something in me that does that to her that I don't see from my vantage point. So it's okay. It's all in me. But in order to experience all that I am, the devotee experiences it more than I do. So that is his strategy, another way of talking about it. So I'll have to try to place myself in her position. This is the inner side of it. So anyway, Mahaprabhu took sannyas, right? We got that far, and he was concerned about the mantra that he would receive, the typical translation of which Tattvamasi, coming from the prominent Shankar Sampradaya at the time, the Dvaitins, was, you are that. And he thought, if I am that, then I've lost my love. If I am God, then how could I love God? So he was very disappointed. Murari Gupta told him, think of it like this. There's another way of translating that. You are his. And Mahaprabhu liked this very much. So when he met Keshava Bharati, the sannyas guru, he said, I want to ask if this is the mantra that you're going to give me. And so he whispered it in his ear, and Keshava Bharati had an epiphany. He realized, I am Sandipani Muni from Krishna Lila. This is Krishna in another Lila. I was his guru in Avantipur. After he came to Mathura, he and Balaram, schooled by me. Here I am again in another Lila. He couldn't say anything. And Mahaprabhu just did kirtan. Off he went. Of course, he got waylaid by Nityananda Prabhu, brought back to Shantipur, Advaita's house. Chandrasekhar arranged to bring everybody except the most worshipable Vishnupriya. He could not come. And Sachi, he stayed there for about 10 days. There was festival and all. Sachi had to weigh in and ultimately and wisely suggested, go to Jagannath Puri, stay there. You cannot give up. That's what you've done in your madness. You should go to Jagannath Puri instead, because there, Jagannath Puri is like another room in the same house with Navadvipa. There's so much commerce between there. Devotees are coming and going. So we'll hear news about you and so on and so forth. And of course, it is the desire of so many devotees in Navadvip, in Bengal, to witness the Rath Yatra. Sadhakas. Siddhas may have a different idea. Of course, they're coming. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will go to Jagannath Puri, and every year so many devotees will come for Rath Yatra because he's there. Of course, there's still some distance between themselves and himself because he's a sannyasi, but something's better than nothing, right? So they go annually. One time, Prabhupada called me to his room in Mayapur, and he was on his bed, and he said, when I was a boy, we just started talking about when I was a boy, then I wanted, my desire was to somehow take the train and go to Jagannath Puri and participate in the Rath Yatra. This was my childhood ambition, he said. And I would dream about it at night. And I bothered my father about it so much that he got me a toy Rath cart, chariot, and then I was allowed to perform that in the courtyard, and I would invite the neighbors, and I would have a Rath Yatra in my childhood. And he said, but everybody thought that it was just play. And he opened his eyes, as he would sometimes very wide, and he said, but it was real. Now I'm doing all over the world, but he's having Rath Yatras. So I like that very much. I just listened, What can you say? Yes, you are, Prabhupada. You're doing it all over the world. One of my Gaura, another story comes to mind. A famous Rath Yatra, probably the most, San Francisco was famous because it was the first one and so forth. The one London was famous too, because London was what it was to the British and so forth. But one time in San Francisco during the Rath Yatra, Prabhupada used to come annually and participate in that. And so we were coming down through the park and so forth, and the Prabhupada stopped the whole parade, right? Stopped it. Got down off of the cart with a couple of devotees. This is Golden Gate Park. Went into the bushes, past urine, call of nature. Got back up on the cart and so forth. So after the Rath Yatra, one of my Gaura said to me, what do you think was the best part of the Rath Yatra? The kirtan. And then he told me what he thought. When Prabhupada took a pee, that was that. Because he said, Jagannath Swami. This is Jagannath Swami, right? One way to look at it, the Lord of the universe, what it means literally. He stopped his whole parade, which is a huge thing, just so that Prabhupada could. This is Krishna consciousness. Very, very beautiful. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after taking sannyas with the blessed Masaji, he went to Jagannath Puri. There's different descriptions in the different biographies of who he was accompanied by, but all of them were obviously without family. Family men and women had to stay behind. They would come annually, and the leadership of Shivananda Sain, who was organized, and spend the rainy season, which would begin in July. Once they got there, well, they can't go anywhere because of the rain, heavy monsoons. So they would stay for 4 months and then return. So Mukunda went. He had a kirtanir. He had Jagannananda, who was a cook, among other things, of course. Nityananda Prabhu, and Gadadhar Pandit is describing as accompanying him in some of the text, but with some intimate associates. And so they walked. It's about a 10-hour train ride from Puri to Navadvip. So they walked, and this was not an easy thing to do, given the political climate at the time, because in Bengal, you had the Nawab Hussain Shah. He was a Muslim leader, and he, would go out and conquer other places and whatnot. And his arch enemy was Pratap, Maharaj Prataparudra, who was the king of Orissa and Jagannath Puri, which is the biggest temple in the subcontinent of India. Jagannath means Lord of the universe. So all kinds of religious worshipers would come to Jagannath Puri, all kinds of different ideas of who Jagannath is. I mean, you got to kind of wonder, what it given his shape and so on and so forth. So there's Buddhists, Tantric Buddhists that worship him, and all kinds of people. So the king was Pratap. He was a powerful Hindu king, and he was able to keep the Muslim invasion from entering into Jagannath Puri. So he was very accomplished and protective of the Hindu devotees of all varieties, right? Jagannath is, Prabhupada used to say, well, Jagannath is 80% merciful. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all merciful, 80%. There's some nice stories about his nature in terms of how he accepts worship. The famous story of Pundarik Vidyanidhi, who complained to Sri Damodar. These guys, they're offering the cloth to Jagannath, and it's got the starch in it. They didn't wash it out first and get the starch out and give it to him. This is improper. And Sri said, well, Jagannath's accepting it here, so I don't know if you want to, bring it up with him. He's been accepting it like this, I think once every year, the new cloth or something like that. And so Pundarik went to sleep that night and dreamed Krishna and Balaram from the altar. Jagannath came this dream and started slapping him and saying, don't criticize our pujaris like that. We like that cloth. And he woke up and his cheeks were red, swollen. Then he ran out and said, Jagannath and Baladev have assaulted me. And he was celebrating, you know. We're not very fond of the Advaitin Siddhanta, of the Mayavadis. Though when Prabhupada gave me sannyas, he said, we were on a walk in the morning and somebody said, and Tripurari said this, and Prabhupada said, it is Tripurari Maharaj. And then he told me, he said, and to me, he said, we should even, if we even see a Mayavadi sannyasi, we should pay our obeisances to him. You know that secretly, Prabhupada went in Agra, where there's a big statue of Gandhi. He paid his obeisances to Gandhi. He was with one other devotee. He couldn't say it because of his preaching and so forth, but there's a little bit inside of him. He respected the greatness of the Mahatma, even though he would criticize him on a philosophical basis and so forth, and how he used the Gita, you know, for political aim, and his idea of Swaraj or liberation was limited within the political circle and so forth. He respected him as a great man, a great man. Whatever, among the politicians, I'm Gandhi, I don't know. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his journey to South India with a small group was a dangerous one. To Jagannath Puri was a dangerous one. Even in some places they had these, they had like mines, landmines, but there was a system that they created where they would put these like blades would be buried, and you step on a thing and the blades would come up. And so it was difficult. It's, you know, it's how people are in the world. So the Muslims in particular were, you know, dangerous for Hindus coming from Navadvip going to Jagannath Puri. And there's a famous Ramchandra Khan who helped to get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates across a particular body of water. And he was a little concerned because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was prone to this like weeping and wailing and starting a kirtan out of nowhere and so forth. He said, I'll take you on the boat, but like, don't do that kirtan. It will attract attention. So they agreed, but Mahaprabhu couldn't contain himself. See the water, he thought it was the Jamuna. He began the kirtan. They were about to take over. But by his grace, they arrived safely. Ramchandra Khan became his disciple. Ramchandra Khan. Jai. There's a number of famous stops along the way that he visited there. He had the darshan of Chirchar Gopinath. There's a long story about this, the deity that Madhavendra Puri visited in his effort to bring sandalwood to his deity in Vrindavan. It's a long story, but it's a beautiful, beautiful story. And the story was told by Nityananda Prabhu to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu earlier. Nityananda Prabhu was a disciple of Lakshmipati Tirtha, and he had met Madhavendra Puri before coming to Navadvip and joining with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he knew of the story. He told it to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When they arrived there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was overwhelmed, remembering the pastimes of Madhavendra Puri and how Chirchar Gopinath, he's named after Madhavendra Puri because from the time of Madhavendra Puri's visit there, at that time he stole or hid the sweet rice that's offered to him nightly, special sweet rice offered to him. He hid it, and then he appeared in the dream of the Pujari and said, I have hidden the sweet rice, and I want you to come and get it and give it to this devotee, Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri had been in the temple, and he thought, the sweet rice from this temple is very famous. If I could taste it, then I could understand how and I could make it for my deity Gopal. Hmm? And then he thought, oh, I'm just a sense enjoyer. Just see, I just want to taste the sweet rice. I'm so fallen. And then he left. And so the next morning, the Pujari, having been told, I'm making the story short, to find Madhavendra, he went in the market and it's like, Madhavendra, where is my Gopinath has stolen? Chirchara means thief. And he's Chirchara Gopinath. Gopinath has stolen sweet rice from Madhavendra. So Madhavendra was trying to attract no attention to himself whatsoever, but Gopinath wanted everybody to take note of him, right? In the story. So Mahaprabhu told the story to all of his devotees, and they all tasted the sweet rice and so forth, and they went on. They went to Sakshi Gopal temple, famous also. Sakshi Gopal, the deity whose there was a Brahmin, and he was older and in a difficult situation. To make it short, and the young lad helped him out, and in a big way. And so he said, I want to give my daughter in marriage to you. And he said, I don't think you should make a promise like that, because I'm from this caste over here, and they're going to say that over there when you get back home. No, I said, I've said I will do it, and so forth. And so when they got back, of course, then there was a whole caste thing, social dynamics. You can't marry that girl. It's not, my father didn't say that. You're making that up, and so forth. So the Brahmin was in a difficult situation. And what I think that the village decided was, if you can get Gopal to bear witness, he'll believe you, something like that. So he asked Gopal, you're a deity, you've got legs, people say you can walk, so I'm in a difficult situation here, so I'm going to go, and maybe you should come with me. And so deity told him, I'll follow you, but as soon as you look back, then I won't go any further, I'll stop there. So he's going in distance to bring Gopal, because the promise was made before the Gopal deity. So he returned to the deity, and then he was returning with the deity, and he could hear the footprints behind him, but he wouldn't look back. He couldn't believe this is really happening. It just was like, imagine that he can't look back. He can't look back. And he got, just on the outer perimeter of the city, and he just couldn't. Is he really here? But now I'm coming into the city, and am I hallucinating or what? And there was the deity, stopped right there. So obviously, it became apparent that he couldn't carry this big deity all this way. So the townspeople, upon seeing the Gopal, they built a temple there. Sakshi Gopal, Sakshi means a witness. Mahaprabhu told the story. Then coming into Bhubaneswar, near Puri, he visited different Shiva temples. He was very, this is characteristic of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. We have a very a fondness for Tripurari. It's the name for Shiva. For Shiva, for Mahadev, right? And for good reason. That's the whole theological discussion. And well, in short, of course, Vaishnava Mitasham, who Bhagavatam says he's a great Vaishnava. Many people glorify Shiva, but what we say about him, that's really flattering. He's got a place right at the gate of the Rasa Lila. Gopishwar Mahadev ki jai. Can't get in without his opening the gate. So we give him a very high place. Mahaprabhu showed us. Other sampradayas, some of them won't ever enter the Vaishnavas, won't enter the Shiva temple. There's some I think in the Madhva Sampradaya, they have a mantra that when you pass urine, then you say that I'm passing urine on the head of Shiva or something like that. Probably because of the representation of Shiva there in that vicinity, which was so antagonistic to the worship of Vishnu. Anyway, we're not like that. So Mahaprabhu showed the example. And so as they came closer, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I think he went to bathe, and he asked Nityananda to hold his cloth and his danda and so forth. And so when Mahaprabhu was out of sight, Nityananda took his danda and broke it in 3 places and threw it in the river. What kind of brother is that? He's very good, obedient in Vrindavan, but he's not like that in Navadvip for good reasons. So When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back to him, where's my danda? He said, well, I fell on it, it broke in 3 places. And so outwardly, Mahaprabhu showed some displeasure. He said, all the gods are present in the danda. I should go on without you. Why have I brought you people with me? His own associates. But inwardly, of course, he was pleased with Nityananda, who just couldn't like put it together, relate to it. Krishna, my younger brother, whose skin is so soft that if you touch it with a leaf, it will, like if you press on your, it'll change color. So just with a leaf, it will change color. So soft and so tender, the enjoyer, and he's carrying the danda, danda means punishment. It's not for punishing other people. The sannyasi is supposed to punish himself. My mind, my body, my words, I hold the danda in mind. They should only be engaged in Krishna's service. Right? Tree danda. And so Nityananda Prabhu couldn't relate to the flute carrier bearing a danda. The austerity for the supreme enjoyer becomes ascetic. He just couldn't relate to it. So in a moment of ecstasy, he broke the danda. Mahaprabhu could appreciate it internally, but externally he made a show of this, well, you guys are incompetent, you broke my danda. So he went ahead. He said, either you can go ahead or I'll go before you, whichever it is. He was externally, of course, he was very strictly following the sannyas order. In fact, when he left, when he began the journey, just as they started off, he said, now, has anybody brought anything with them that anyone has given them? Mukunda? Jagadananda? Radha? If you have, give it back. We just depend on Krishna. We got a meal today. We had a place to rest. He will take care of us the next day. So very strict standards. And just 24 years old. So you can see again how this is very good. He's going to very much going to stand out and create a teachable moment. And he comes, of course, it's getting a little long, I know, but I'm sorry, into Jagannath Puri. And comes before the deity. I mean, on the way, he's falling and rising and weeping and falling and stumbling into Jagannath Puri. What to speak then when he enters into the temple, and he runs up to embrace Jagannath. And as I said, many people, many types of worshippers come to Jagannath Puri and have different ideas of who he is. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw him with the peacock feather, how he's not externally decorated there, and playing a flute. He saw Shyam Sundar in him. What he saw was this moment. Jagannath Puri, from Gaudiya Vaishnava point of view, is one moment in the Dwarka Lila. It's one moment in the Dwarka, eternal moment in the Dwarka Lila. And that's a moment in the Dwarka Lila where Krishna, Jagannath, Krishna in Dwarkanath, has been caused by circumstance, by the chatter around him of other devotees about Vrindavan that he overheard. And he goes into ecstasy. His body transforms. This is Jagannath. His eyes become big, looking for Radha. No blinking. He has no eyelashes, always open. This is a moment in Dwarka where Krishna is fully reflecting on Vrindavan. Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj used to call it a train wreck. The Vrindavan and the Dwarka conceptions crashing together. And Jagannath is the victim. He's hospitalized, on the altar. His arms are tucked in and his head has gotten big. So, like charming. This is ecstatic transformation. Balaram looks at him and the same thing happens to him. Subhadra looks at it and the same thing happens to her. And everybody in Dwarka is like, oh my goodness. So this is told in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. In the first canto of Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Narada Muni is the protagonist, and he's going from one devotee to another to find the highest expression of bhakti. And he goes to this one, that to Hanuman, to Prahlad, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, he goes to Dwarka. And in Dwarka, he accidentally speaks in such a way as to remind Krishna of Vrindavan, and until this whole thing happens. Right? This transformation. And Nard is like, oh my God, what did I do? I've caused a disturbance here. And of course, when it's all over, this is the Parima Sutra, the whole first canto of Bhagavatam. He says, Guru Upakari Smatita Priyana. Krishna says, no, don't think like that. The best Upakari, the best friend, is one who reminds one of their lover. Those transformations. I'm standing in Dwarka, but my heart is living in Vrindavan. You gave me the Vrindavan experience. And so this is another instance. Unard, who is Srivas Thakur, right, who is Mother Mangal, is shedding light on the excellency of Gopi Bhav, playing a supportive role. And like a Priyanarmasaka, he says, you reminded me of my beloved. No one could be a better friend than you. And this is the end of the first canto, wherein from Dwarka, the light is cast to what Nara has done on Vrindavan and the Gopis love. He doesn't go to the Gopis ultimately and talk to them and say, that way is shown by Narada. So this is what Jagannath Puri means to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's that moment. And he sees Jagannath is looking everywhere for Radha. When the Ratha Yatra is performed, he comes out of the temple and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is leading it by his dancing. And Jagannath is so startled at some point that he stops the whole Ratha Yatra to see the dancing of Radha. That's Krishna. This is very complicated. That's Krishna. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, but he actually appeared so much like Radha in his dancing, because Krishna says, Ami Shisha Guru Nata, Radikal Premera Ummata. Ami Shisha, I am the disciple, and Radha is my Guru Nata. Nata means Prem Vidilai. She is my guru. Her dancing, Nata, is my guru. Her praying drives me mad. Jagannath saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing, and he thought, that's my guru. And Nityananda Prabhu from a distance saw this at the same time, and he stopped everything, paid his obeisances to Radha. Maldev ki jai. So the stories and Leela's play of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his sannyas, they're very charming to us. They're full of meaning and teaching for us that ultimately shows us how to enter into the courtyard of Srivas Thakur, for that Rasa Sankirtan. He shows us the way by his public life, the way he conducted himself, hearing, chanting, speaking to educated people, charming them, and educating Rup Sanatan in what he's about and so forth, empowering them to write the books that they did that turned the waterfall of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's love into a lake that we could approach and drink from and take advantage of and so forth. It's all in the Madhya Lila. So it's the biggest Lila of the three in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's the center, it's the way. And from the public life, the way he conducted himself, he was taken by the power of that into a private life. He didn't decide, I think I'll retire now. But he could no longer function as a public figure. He could no longer give discourse and debate with people or be in the public eye. He was in the arms of Ramananda Roy and Sarup Damodar. Krishnadas Kaviraj described it as compares to Sarup Damodar to Lalita Saki, and he compares Ramananda Roy to Subal Saka, ministering to Krishna to help him understand the love of Radha and step into that bhava himself. So he goes from his Antya Lila, Madhya Lila, and his Antya Lila, becomes a private person. And you find there's not a lot of teaching in that section. Not a lot of teaching there. When you get bhav, then what can you teach about that? You can teach what to do, that bhav will appear in your heart. You can give some theoretical knowledge about what it is, but it's a nice example of a girl who was pregnant and had not had a child yet with her first. And she was pretty far along and she could come into labor at any time. So she told her mother, I'm going to take a little rest. If I come into labor, let me know, wake me up. Be sure to wake me up. You can imagine what the mom said. When you come into labor, no one's going to have to wake you up to let you know. At that point in Bhava Bhakti, then your bhakti as an exercise is fully informed. Now in sadhana bhakti, we try to inform our bhakti through teachings and the example set by the teachers and so forth. And gradually we firm our faith through, we harmonize our head with our heart, like I was speaking earlier. So our love is now wise, well thought out, and grounded and so forth. And then with that kind of nishta, then you can start to go the other side, ruchi, asakti, and bhava. And from bhav, then it turns into prema. This is the idea. So all this is taught by Chaitanya, for example. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Jagannath Puri and Sarvam Bhattacharya and so forth, but we'll have to do that another time. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Radha Govinda ki jai, Krishna Balaram ki jai, Gauri Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki jai, Or Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Or Premanande. Vanchakalpa Hirudhasya Pasandadeva Vamsati Kanam Vaishnavi Varunam Anantapuri Vaishnavi ki jai. Oh,
His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Tripurari Swami Guru Maharaj ki jai.
Very nice to be with you for the last couple of weeks. I must say, humble, valued experience, a real interest in the subject, enthusiasm, and participation. It's very, it's very humbling. Very much grateful to all of you coming in your ears and hearts, and not being 2 pounds. Thanks to all of you. Being nice to us and so forth. Hope to come again. Please.